right, Rich and Sam, take us back before real estate, guys. I mean, what were you guys doing? How did you come together? KR Boston, was born. How did that all happen?
Yeah, for sure. I've been licensed since 2005, my junior year in college, and started off in leasing, went into real estate development, worked for a company called the Related Companies, but always worked real estate on the weekends and part-time. But then in 2010 is where I started doing it full-time. And, and during that time, that's when I met Sam. We were actually running competing brokerages, but we were friendly and they were right next to each other. Then I went on to be a team leader for the Keller Williams Cambridge Market Center. And we came together on our third attempt in 2020, January of 2020, Sam. Yeah.
Right. Very cool. So competing brokerages, you're friends. You never know who you're going to be in business with, so you may as well be friends. How about you, Sam? You're on the other end of this equation. This guy's like courting you or whatever. And what's going on in your head?
Right. So Rich and I, we first met. He was looking to buy the brokerage. Actually, I was working at the time. So that didn't work out, but that's when him and I really hit it off. We were kind of good friends. Another 2 years from that, it's just like 2014, I actually launched my own brokerage. That was our competing brokerages at the time. He was actually like 4 doors down, and we would just hang out. He would, he owns a few properties on that block, and he would make sure I have the keys. So we just kind of built from there. A few years later after that, him and I got together with at
Awesome.
KW.
Sounds pretty modest, but yeah.
I mean, so you guys have obviously accomplished a lot already in your career. I mean, last year, doing like over $1.5 million in gross commission income. So, I mean, you guys have grown this team. Like, take us through some of the journey of, growing this thing and some of the lessons that you've been learning over the last few years.
Sure.
For sure. I mean, we really came together. Sam has been running a lot. We both see ourselves as visionaries, but definitely, when it came to January of 2020, when the pandemic hit, we had our everything on our individual brokerages in the back end ready to go. And we decided to launch right when COVID hit. And, through leveraging virtual assistants and our own admin team as well, to having a massive video tour database, we really just shut everything down for 2 days and figured out how to lead the industry with virtual showings. And, Sam was a huge part of that process. And Sam, you want to talk about that?
Right. So the brokerage that I started back in 2014, it was a learning lesson. It really prepped me for what was going to happen with Rich and I as we got together. In 2014, I launched it. In 2016, I pretty much the whole thing pretty much fell apart. I learned a lot, but I was able to, one of the things that I read was the MREA. And so I ended up, I said, hey, these principles are really good. And so I applied it to my business. We built it. And then eventually, Rich and I got together and rebuilt that same philosophies, based off those same philosophies. And we brought it to where we are today. Right. And so in 2020, it was tough because we started off right when the pandemic hit. And I had, at the time, we had one agent working with us at the time. And it was just, because we're so small, we saw the benefit, we saw the silver linings in that. So we were able to pivot a lot faster than a lot of the other brokerages that were still doing it the way they have known. But so we pivoted to really leveraging our virtual tours. When Rich and I merged together, Rich had a massive database of video tours, and we increased it from there. And so we grew. In fact, a lot of the companies in the area couldn't believe that we had so many pictures, so many videos of the local places, the local apartments and buildings and condos. And so we really thrived when everyone else was kind of like trying to figure out what was going on. But then soon after that, we started growing. And then everything happened so fast. And then eventually I got the offer for TL of the Cambridge office. At the time, we only had seven agents at the time. But we just, we have such great staff members, great team members, that it just kept growing from there. And we're just blessed.
So I want to jump in on this whole like this video library or whatever that you put together, and how you guys actually like figured out you could leverage this really quickly. Can you take us into that a little bit, if you would? Because I mean, you have a point. I mean, even when I look at the giant brokerages around here, the bigger ones took some time to really pivot their direction, and they saw it in their statistics. It was the teams who pivoted to this virtual tour. We're going to keep you safe language, all this stuff really early in the pandemic that really saw massive success. It sounds like that's exactly what you did. And part of what you leveraged was this video library that you keep referencing. Can you tell us more a little about that?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. And, it's from our, when we started in the industry, started building up a massive database of apartments, all the luxury apartment buildings, everything that we had listings for, thousands of listings. And, there were days when I first got in the industry where we would set up 70 showings a day and run up and down units with cameras, edit them. We would edit them ourselves on Final Cut Pro, upload them, and just begin listing them. And so we've been in the video tour game for quite some time now. So it took a few years to build it up to where it is now. And then with Sam's expertise in virtual leverage, we were able to, staffing was always tough for both of us when we were building up our individual teams. But taking the career visioning, with Brad Knowles, really that's a course that changed my life. Brad from Portland, Maine, he's a mass coach, and at the time, and he, really took us through the KPA process, how to effectively hire, someone who'd be happy in that role, and how to build and have goals that, that really encompass, all of the individual goals of every member on our team. And that's really where Sam shines, when it comes to that, and making sure that we have bigger goals than anyone could ever imagine. And that's stuff with his category of expertise too.
I'm really interested in this team dynamic, especially as your team is growing. And Rich, you mentioned a few minutes ago that both you and Sam are both visionaries. And I'm just curious to hear what that dynamic is like in a partnership with two people that have a vision. What does that collaboration look like? What happens when you hit that challenge? What are some best practices? What do our listeners need to know about working in collaboration with another visionary?
Right. I mean, I guess it's kind of like we just really jive together really, really, really smooth. I always tell everyone, Rich is like, we're different visionaries. So he's more of the out front on the table, like come this way. And I'm more like securing the table. I specialize in systems operations. And he specializes, his network is massive. He loves like getting in front of a lot of people, that high energy. I'm more, let's make sure everything is tight in the back room, and he's out on stage. So it just works well. And we respect each other. Right.
I like the analogy of securing the table, because I've seen Rich on a table or two.
Exactly.
And we do read books together. Sam reads way more books than I do, but it's books like Traction, really just trying to understand, what we're bringing to the table. And definitely when we went through career visioning together, we realized what our strengths were by going through each other's KPAs and really understanding, how we differ and how we can work towards our strengths to work together, but I'll tell you this, when we first came together, I was like, Sam, let's do 500K in GCI. Sam's like, what? He's like, we're going for 2 million. You know what I mean? Like it's just, and he literally put the goals of every single agent on the team together. And he's like, this is what we're doing this year, and we were able to come very close to hitting that goal and hopefully do so, in this upcoming year.
Right. I think it's really important. Like when you're partnering, there's nothing more powerful than a partnership. Honestly, one person on their own, you only can go so far, but when you can team up with someone, if you can make it like figure out how to make that work, it's like you just go so much further. So with Rich and I, again, we just complement each other very well. And we just I respect his strengths and he respects mine. And sometimes we come to a fork in the road, and there's very few forks because our visions are aligned. So down the road, when it comes down to decision time, he trusts me when it's, when I'm making a decision on something, and I trust him when it's like, hey, this is my wheelhouse. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And we back it 100%. I back him 100%. So when he makes a decision, I'm like, let's go 100%. He's like, Sam, this is your wheelhouse. Let's go 100%. And it just works.
That's awesome. So you, obviously getting to the scale that you got so quickly, it requires an organizational backend that's going to support this structure, right? Sometimes I use the analogy of a trellis and a vine, and the GCI and the production is the vine, and like, what's the trellis that's actually supporting this thing? So give us an idea of like what your team actually looks like in terms of the organizational part,
right?
The people.
Right. So early on, I really learned that you need people, right? So I could not deliver the service, the level of service I wanted to my client base just on my own. So I made systems, I made operations that are leverageable. And my motto is, if it cannot be repeated, then I don't do it, right? So it started off with the base of that. I mean, a lot of people are afraid to sit down and make those operations. They want to get right into it, start calling, start mailing. But the real work is sitting down, making that manual. Like I literally made my own manual. Originally it was like 130 pages. Just sat down, I wrote down the entire process, exactly how I wanted it done. And I over time I end up, I kind of worked it down. I kind of cut the fat and got to a really solid core. But then multiplying that over and over and over again by hiring and trying, and it wasn't perfect at first. I failed, I failed a lot. I failed more than most. I think that's what made me so good at operations and systems, is I wasn't afraid to try it. I'm like, okay, let's try this. We run the system. And then, okay, that didn't work. Like making the light bulb was like a tons of reiterations and versions of that manual that went over and over again to we have what we have now.
So the takeaway I hear there, Sam, is if you expect the leverage that you hire to execute your system, you have to be the one really being involved in designing that system and documenting that system. So then you can give them the expectation, train them to it, and now they can execute at a high level. The second big takeaway there was don't be afraid to mess it up. It's better to get it moving and figure out what's missing along the way than try to get it perfect because it's going to have to evolve over time either way.
Right. Perfection is the enemy of production, of getting things done. So don't go for perfection. Just go get it out. Just get it out there, run it, and don't hide. One of the books I read was The Lean Startup by Eric Ries earlier on. And it's just like, don't make things in private, like get it out, he called it the MVP, the minimal viable product, get it out to the people so they can give you feedback. So in the case of our operation systems, the feedback loop is with the agents. And the clients. So really hearing back fast, like, okay, this works, this doesn't work. This makes me successful, this doesn't. And so I was able to like run that over and over again until I got like a really good system and operation. And then after that, once you have good systems and operations going, you got to have good people. And Jim Rohn would say, you can't bring your ducks to Eagle School.
I feel like I've heard every Jim Rohn quote, and I've never heard that.
Yeah, you can't bring your ducks to Eagle School. So they'll go for the rabbit and make it its friend, he says. so have good staff, good systems, good operations, and you can deliver a really good product, really good service.
Well, so let's dive into the people part then, because like who are the people actually running these systems and processes in your business? Once we've established this, once we know that we have the feedback loop necessary to make it better, who are the people actually running this in your world? What does that look like?
So we have quite a big staff. I think so. When I first started off, I didn't have the budget to hire someone, someone in person for 40, 50, 60,000 a year. So I immediately started looking for virtual assistants. And so I found a virtual assistant to help me out with my marketing, my standard replies and scheduling and setting up appointments for me. And so I went from there, and I was like, oh, wow, this is a really good system. And so I leveraged it so that it was helping my one of my colleagues. And I was like, okay, I can start making a team off of this. So I actually built a team within another brokerage. And I was like, okay, I can do this. This looks really good. And I actually told the guy, I was like, hey, listen, I can redo this a lot. So he actually gave me the position to be operations manager. At the time, I was like 22 years old. And he gave me operations manager of his company. and it went very well. And I was like, 2 years in, I was like, okay, now you can make me a partner, or so basically it didn't work out. But that's how I started, my company, was because I had to, out of necessity. But it's really based off the systems, and having really good people to back it up. And the good thing about the virtual assistants, they were just available when most people weren't, and I didn't have the money. So at the time, I started with one. Right now, we have 7 virtual assistants. We have a leasing manager. We have a sales manager. We have a marketing coordinator, and we have a transaction coordinator. So we're like leveraged pretty well.
We have a marketing director too, but our marketing coordinator on the VA side assists our marketing director. So oftentimes they're just assisting one of our full-time staff members too. But again, it's tasks that if you are in front of a computer, it can be replicated in some way in most cases.
Right.
And that's really what we've been doing for a few years now, prior to the start of many of these VA companies and hiring staffing companies.
Right.
Rich, admittedly, before I got into real estate, I had never heard of a virtual assistant. So just for any of our listeners that maybe have not been exposed to this yet, just talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, what kind of activities you give them or responsibilities, how you find them. Just kind of give us what's virtual leverage 101.
Yeah, I would say, virtual assistants are everywhere. There, you can find them in Europe, you can find them in South America, in the United States as well. And pricing, varies as well too. Definitely the game has evolved, along, maybe in 2010 or even before, when we were just getting started with it, you could find them pretty easily, but really, there's a lot of turnover. So you really need to know what you're looking for, and find the right people, interview a lot. And that's an area where I struggled mightily, is to keep a team of virtual assistants, because they're constantly turning over for all sorts of reasons, and that's how Sam and I ended up getting into Cyberbacker. It's really that product is that, in the last month, they've interviewed over 3,000 applicants to land 130 VAs, right? And that's something that, Sam, how many VAs have you interviewed in the course of your lifetime?
So many. That's one of the toughest parts. And I always found that I trained a few people on how to bring on their own VAs. And prior to Cyberbacker, that was like the hardest part, is to teach them, like, no, you're gonna have to let this go. And it's a lot of times they're not trained. They weren't trained. I used to use, I think it was Odesk, and then it turned into Upwork. And it's kind of wild west. Versus, I think, so my experience with Cyberbacker so far, it's these guys are trained and ready to go. It's a lot more turnkey, and you still need patience, because you have to be personally ready. So before you get a Cyberbacker, you need to make sure you're ready for that. That means that you have your systems, you have everything in line, because they're force multipliers. So they'll multiply whatever you are. So if you're inefficient, ineffective, and everything is not like together, this is just going to multiply that. It's going to be more madness. So make sure that your house is in order. Sam,
I really
multiply that.
I really like you putting it that way. A virtual assistant is a force multiplier, because, correct me if I'm wrong. Your director of operations, is that an in-person or is that a virtual assistant?
In person.
That one's in person. And sometimes
my first hire is in,
just like currently, like your operations director.
My operations director is, my leasing director is in person. My sales director is in person. I do have an ops manager that is virtual.
Oh, you do have an ops manager. Awesome. Well, so I think like the force multiplier and multiplying like whatever it is that you already have in your business, I think that's very spot on with a lot of the virtual assistants. They're going to execute what you give to them. And right. So if you give them chaos, they're going to execute that. And it's not like, it's not bad on them, because they're trained to go execute whatever they're handed. So, okay. So if we're hearing you correctly, then a virtual assistant is, yes, a force multiplier, but what can real estate professionals leverage to an assistant, right? So one of the conversations I'm in the most as someone who runs a brokerage is with agents who are starting to do volume and they don't have time. They're not leveraged. And they also are in that boat where you were of saying, I don't have $60,000 a year, especially in this job market right now. Like I can't offer them benefits. I can't offer them this. I don't have 40 hours worth of work for them to stay full time. So they just fall back to, well, I guess I'm stuck.
Right.
And it is, to Joe's point, crazy to me sometimes that people don't even realize that this world exists. Like what are the capabilities of a virtual assistant in you guys' experience? Like what can they do?
So many things. They can go into your calendars. They can, the calendar management, database management. Most Cyberbackers they're all trained in Command, which is a platform that we use. There's Command backers. It's an actual position that you can hire from with Cyberbackers, so they can do data migrations, smart plans, email marketing, lead accelerators. They can even be ISAs. They could be the ones inviting your SOIs, to events. They can be putting together CMAs, all sorts of things really. And the best way to start is really, I like to call it just the what am I good at and what do I like to do method. And you just write down, all the tasks that you currently do as an individual agent. This is how I do consult a lot of my clients as a team leader currently, is writing down all their tasks and understanding what they're good at, what they're not good at, and what they should be leveraging out first.
Right. So I get that question a lot. It's like, okay, what could virtual assistants, like Sam, I see you have a lot of virtual assistants. How could I use that? And it's like, well, it depends on what you like to do and what you don't like to do. As far as their capabilities, anything that can be done from your computer. So if you're doing it from your computer, it can be leveraged off. Social media marketing in general, client, like Rich said, client intake, follow up. A lot of people don't want to necessarily call 100 people from their database or 300 people from their database and invite to an event. This person can make sure they do that. You might be really busy. I mean, a lot of top agents are really busy, so they don't have the time to do a lot of that. Or even if you do have the time, you could be doing it. You can do something that's at a higher value. So earlier on, which book did I think this was from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the things was you need to value your time. So I took how much I made per year and I divided that out. And I was like, okay, listen, I'm making like $125 an hour. And I can pay this person about $8 an hour or $9 an hour. It makes more sense for them to do that task and let me focus on the task that keeps me at the $125 an hour income range or something like that. Right. So I kind of noticed that on really early on. And so you have to understand that. So there's some people that just like, if it's, they have that attitude that, if it needs to get done, I need to do it myself. That's that's not the best way to leverage. I'll say that's not the best way to grow. I'll tell you that.
I love that you brought up that cost per hour, Sam. And that's really the primary reason that small business owners should be considering using virtual leverage because of that dollar rate. And really what I hear you saying is you can train your virtual assistant to really do anything, right? If it's something that you need them to do, they can do it. Now, the only exception to that would be any licensed real estate duties, right? And depending on the state laws, in most cases, they're not going to be writing contracts or sending contracts, but outside of those state specific limitations around real estate, you can train them anything else.
Right. So know your local laws. There's a lot of them here in Massachusetts. So that, you can't negotiate any contracts. They can't do anything like that.
That's property, things like that either.
Right.
But, there's so much around that you can leverage, especially on the ISA side too.
Right.
Is that, Gary Keller said it best at Family Reunion in Orlando this year, is that we don't have a lead generation problem anymore. Leads are purchasable. Everyone has these massive databases. It's really the problem with lead conversion right now. And is that, only 20% of our clients are actually coming back to work with us. What's happening to the rest of them? They're going to the teams, the highly leveraged teams, or they're going through AI, and that's really what's happening in our country is that, maybe several years ago, people laughed and scoffed at I'm never buying leads from Zillow. Well, many of them are right now, right? Now, the next frontier is I would never buy an appointment and give up 60% of my commissions. That's what AI is trying to do right now. So it's almost like a massive like database grab right now. And, it's a race. We're fighting AI. And to be honest, having an ISA, okay, that understands your value proposition, what your team is bringing to the table, right? Your standards, right, is much better than AI. They understand the whys, right? They are human beings. They are real people, right? And they're getting better and better, and it's really about finding the best.
Right.
And that's really why we partnered with Cyberbacker on this, is because we have years of experience, and lots of mistakes made, and we understand the value of our time, in actually being able to find the right people for our organizations. And especially with the great resignation happening, how many realtors and top producing teams are having trouble just filling, their positions right now, right? There's lots of turnover, and, people are expecting, every type of perk and the ability to work virtually, maybe coming into the office 2 or 3 days a week. That issue you don't have with, virtual leverage, right?
Right. I'd like to park on this idea of the best practices around hiring. I've used Cyberbacker myself, and they're one of many virtual assistant companies that exist. And what I loved about my experience with them is I got on a call and I was able to interview as many assistants as I wanted to find the right fit for me. And then Cyberbacker, trained them on basic technology, basic CRMs, calendars, and then gave them to me as a basically trained asset so I could continue to train them now to my team. So talk to us about some of the best practices in identifying, hiring, and training your next team member.
I mean, with Cyberbacker, it's pretty easy. Without Cyberbacker just going off on your own, probably have to have at least 50 interviews, before even possibly landing someone, that you might want to work with. And then you have to deal with the 3 months or 4 months of taking them through the 30, 60, 90, right? So I would say definitely review the KPA. That's a powerful tool. I have not made a single hire since joining Keller Williams in 2017 without going through the full KPA process. And that is integrated with Cyberbacker, right? So it makes it so much easier for me to be able to review that, especially when you're going through, as Joe said, those rapid fire interviews, right? It's one after the next, right? Agents and rainmakers, we're not necessarily the best at hiring. It's not a secret, right? We are great at selling. We are great at being out there with our clients, being front facing, and now that the world is opening back up, we're on the road now. We're on the road more than we used to be, right? So now we have our calendars are just super efficient as compared to, 2 years ago. How are we going to keep how are we going to keep our level of productivity while also having to be on the road? It's almost essential that you have to leverage yourself virtually just to keep up with what you've been doing in 2021.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I love that you bring them through the KPA process and treat them really like an employee, like anybody else, because that's what they are. One of the lessons I learned early on was the amount of, the training that I still had to do with them. They're coming to me basically trained, but now I have my team systems and value proposition. And you mentioned this a minute ago, Rich, about their ability to sort of learn and adopt your value proposition, then be able to go explain it. Just talk to us a little bit about best practices or maybe lessons learned around training your VA once you've identified them to really understand their role and how much time and effort that might take from the leader. Right.
So I can take this one. So the best part, like you said, they have the basic training coming in, and then you're still just like any employee. That's the best way to look at it. They are a member of the team. I bonus my guys. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just virtual. So you need to do this. You need to have a manual. You need to walk them through the manual. One of the big things I did up front is you have to set some time aside to go through the process with them. So not only paper, I have videos, I have videos of me walking through the process, and then I go through it and then I verify it. So when it comes, there's a difference between leverage and delegating. Okay. Leverage means that you're going to give away let's say it takes a task that takes 4 hours, they're going to take 3.5 hours of that, or maybe 3 hours and 45 minutes. You still need 15 minutes to check that. That is way more, leverage is way more powerful than straight delegation. When you just give it to someone, you give them a monkey, you walk away, right? So making sure that it's done to a high degree, the most powerful thing you do is leverage accordingly. So if you're leveraging out 8 hours, expect to have about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour of just checking that. And if you're not doing that, you're messing up your leverage. So that's a huge part of that.
I'd love to just expand on that, because I totally agree with what you just said between delegation and leverage.
It's one of Joe's favorite lines, actually.
It really is, because I do the career visioning in 36 to 90 with Kristen. We just actually wrapped up one yesterday, and we talk a lot about this concept, which is, as Sam just said, when delegation is, okay, here's a task, and I want you to go do this task. But if I have questions, or if I have an unusual scenario, or if I hit a roadblock, I have to come back to you every time because I don't understand the big picture. And what you described, Sam, is delegation is taking the time on the front end to help them understand the bigger vision, their role in that vision, understanding the different projects, so that over time, you'll still be double checking their work, but they now have the ability to make smart decisions, to think critically, to provide suggestions. That's leverage, not just giving them a checklist.
Right. So again, delegating. Yeah. So again, you can delegate. That is there for me. I love leveraging it with, I need to have some kind of accountability. Like KPIs are very important. And that's really important for your staff members, whether they're virtual or in person. They want to know what success is. And they, the same way our business runs off of the feedback, that feedback loop from our clients, so is our staff members. So like our staff members want that feedback loop. So when you if you remove yourself from that feedback loop, even if they are gung-ho and they're happy about their position, short-term, long-term, they burn out because they don't know whether they're sinking or they're swimming. So being very clear on those KPIs and having those monthly reviews, weekly reviews up front, for a brand new person, if they're a VA or if they're in person, I'm meeting with them daily. We're going to make sure everything's on track. And then slowly but surely, as they master the content, now I'll step back 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, and we meet monthly, 30 minutes. Right. Or we have our monthly meeting. So I'm really big on that, especially if you want to be very impactful. You want to have really good control of the level of the quality of service that's going to happen. I'm really good on that. And sometimes you might say, hey, well, what happens when you have a really big, group of people that's working for? Well, if you do the same thing and the person you're delegating it to, you're leveraging it to, also does the same thing, make sure they have 15 minutes and KPIs to deliver back up to you. You're doing the same thing, right? You're holding the knife. You're holding your knife as if that's a service. The edge of that knife is being held very tightly. Versus like we're not just throwing knives, we're holding it tightly. So I think that's very important.
That's something we make sure we do on a daily basis. So we have meetings 8 o'clock, 8:25.
6 days a week.
6 days a week. Well, make sure that we're tracking those numbers.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys, I mean, I can see agents right now, and I get this objection all the time. It's just like, what are some of the limiting beliefs around a virtual assistant that you guys have found?
Right.
Quite a few.
Again, it's that I can only do it. I have to do it on my own. Then it's trust. They lack the ability to trust someone else is the first thing. And a lot of times they because who's normally the person that wants to be a business owner or a real estate agent? It's usually the creatives, right?
The ones with trust issues.
It's the creatives with the trust issues that wants to, the gung ho, they're running out the door, guns a-blazing, right? So one of the biggest issues with that is like, hey, you got to slow down. You got to put process and systems in place, right? And you have to trust. And with an in-person, whether you're hiring someone in person or virtually, you have to have patience. You have to have, I start all the agents that I hire. So I'm gonna give you a credit card. It's a virtual, it's a imaginary credit card. I'm gonna put about $40,000 on this card. And this $40,000 represent GCI that if I gave it to a top agent, they would close, but I'm gonna give it to you. I'm trusting you. And then you can just swipe it. hopefully you learn your lesson by $40,000 because that's your college education. That's your community college education right there. You're going to swipe it on the card. Like, yeah, you messed up with that client. They're not going to work with us anymore. There goes 10 grand, but it's okay. So I give them all like virtual, like on imaginary credit cards, because you have to be able to trust. You have to be able to give grace. It's part of the learning process. There's no losses. There's only lessons. So if you look at it as a loss, like, oh man, that's $40,000 I could have earned if I gave it to my top agent. It's like, yeah, but then you're not growing any talent. You're not growing talent. You're suffocating your business. So part of my year is I'm writing off on this imaginary credit card, losses that yes, if I gave it to my top guys, they would close it, but I have to allow some of my newer guys to give it a shot. And also the same thing with my VAs is like, this is a relationship that's very important to me. They might make a mistake. They might, just like any other person, having that patience, having that grace to go in there after they made a big mistake and sit down with them and say, hey, you learned the lesson. We both learned a lesson right now. We're going to see how we're going to not have that happen again next time. And it's usually that's the case. It's that trust, it's that forgiveness and moving forward. So that's usually like the biggest hurdle, that and the operation stuff, to sit down and calm down that creative things to a path, just like to get the system down. So, yeah.
And I see the biggest is finding the right person. Really is, even sometimes without really going through a deep dive and really understanding, what this person is made up of, really having those conversations, right off the bat, and understanding what the expectations are, the true expectations are on a daily basis, and how we are going to be spending the minutes of every hour of every day. Right. And being very clear about that too. I'd say with that, you would have a pretty strong foundation it's a partnership is what it is.
I'm sure we have some listeners right now wondering, what does this all cost compared to somebody being in person? So talk to us about, in your experience, what is the financial investment for a virtual assistant? What is the range? How do I choose? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Can you go into that?
Sure. So it's going to depend, right? So there's a whole breakdown of like what, depending on what you need. A business evaluation is absolutely the first step. So you need to get your business evaluated to see where you are, so if you're an individual agent and you have no one else on your team, where is it? Some people love and strive in marketing. They should keep their marketing, but maybe their transaction coordination is the first thing they want to leverage off. Maybe they want to keep a hold of that, but they want to leverage off all of their, social media marketing, scheduling. I know a lot of people, like Rich said, we're not short of leads. I have a lot of our agents, our top agents, they're like flooded with leads. I can't even follow up with them. Maybe that's the opportunity first. Let's figure out how to convert those. What about the clients that are in your database right now? So there's a lot of things that you have them do. So we need a business evaluation, right? To figure out what's ideal for you. And then I would say the next thing, it would range from part-time $800 to a full-time person is no more than like $1,800 or $1,700 a month.
Per month.
Per month compared to like I have my in-person staff members I'm paying. It's more on the tune of like $6,000 a month, like $6,000 a month I'm paying them. So, but they're worth it. So I started off with virtual. I've always started, every company I've ever started was always with virtual first. And then the difference is, again, the talent that you're going to find overseas and virtual, it depends. They tend to be more task oriented. They can create, but if you have someone like, my marketing coordinator, my marketing director who's here in Boston, she has her master's in marketing and social media management. She's from Boston. She knows the area. There's no way I can hire someone, even if they're in the States, that I have that kind of market knowledge and area knowledge right here. Right. So sometimes when you get to that point, but I got to the point where I can pay her, that salary that she requires. But at first it was a virtual assistant that was paying like $1,500 a month. Right. So there's levels to it. And so that's what you're looking at.
I mean, you think about that and you just like break that down, like for a full-time 40-hour a week employee. I mean, we're talking like $7, $8, $8.50 an hour, right? Like, I mean,
It comes down to like $8.50 an hour for a full-time employee virtually. Absolutely. And that includes your taxes. There's no taxes. There's no, was it, the
Social Security,
insurance and social.
Yeah,
it's all included. That's all through the service, through
You're paying a flat monthly fee,
they're
taking care of the rest.
It's flat, absolutely. And then I bonus based off of production versus my staff. I love them to death, but they're expensive, right? It's then you have all the insurances you got to pay for, and it gets up there. They're worth their weight in gold for sure. Again, you have to do that analysis, right? And so what that math is per hour right now is whatever you want to put to it. It makes more sense to pay them, right, to do what they're specialized in than for me to do it. Or Rich to do it. So that's how that works.
And there are different types of virtual assistant companies now too, as the industry has grown, but you definitely do pay for what you get, as in any service or product, right? So yeah, that's why we decided to go with Cyberbacker too, is because we understand that the deep process that they go through, the standards that they have in place to even make a single hire. And it's not really about volume. Is that if there is a current shortage, then they spend more time on hiring. They expand their scope, overseas, and make sure that that they're filling the pool back up with associates who have experience, gone through the training. And so that's what we really trust about Cyberbacker.
Awesome. So, there was one other thing that came to my mind when we were talking through like limiting beliefs, and you guys already addressed it, and I just wanted to highlight it. It's the fact that when you're hiring a virtual assistant, you're not hiring a robot. You're not hiring a computer. And like, I feel like I get that like misconception all the time. Like, you're hiring a human being. And so like the more you actually like spend time getting to know them and understanding like what they're after and their motivation, they're just like any other employee that you have.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys have found that with people, but I have found that like, I have a virtual assistant. She's unbelievable. And I call her my executive assistant because that's what she does. She manages like this half of my brain, or whichever one is the task oriented side. I don't know.
She could tell you.
Yeah, she could, and she'll call people sometimes. And I swear people are like, treat her like a robot. And I've had to be more and more intentional, being like, yo, this is an extension of me. Right. Pick up the call or do whatever. And I think sometimes we just like might get into our heads, or maybe you're out there and you've never worked with a virtual assistant. You're just like, oh, like that's just a computer. That's a robot. That's overseas, like whatever. It's like, no, this is a human with like motivations and goals and drive and determination to 100%. Build something big with you. And what a benefit to your business to have someone who is, in my experience, virtual assistants that I've worked with that are really good, that we've gone through the CV process with, we've done all the thing. Like, they don't say no, they say yes, and I'll figure it out. And like, and I'll just be like, we've all hired dozens and dozens or hundreds of people at this point combined between all of us. Like, it's hard to find employees like that.
Right.
And so like, I just think there's such an opportunity in this world to leverage, a company like Cyberbacker and the virtual assistants and the training they go through to really add true leverage to someone's real estate business. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
100%. I remember being in Orlando, a family reunion, answering texts from my VA saying, yes, Wednesday at 2:30 works for me. They're already in my calendar, just confirming that I'm using my calendar wisely. And putting in, the right appointments, but I had 7 appointments set for me by the day I returned. And we saw a lot of each other in Orlando, and it's a blessing, really. Once that partnership is created, once the expectations are there, and it's really, clear, it is generally just task oriented, right? But, once you have that relationship and that trust, I mean, Sam, with Miggs, how many years have you worked with Miggs? And he's still with the organization.
4 years. He helped me out. He helped me build my wholesaling business, and then he came right over to this business. I have VAs that work for me that started with me in 2016. Helped me build like 2 businesses so far. So No, it's 100%. I mean, again, we're in Orlando again. Say, hey, Sam, I just saw you put a 2 p.m. In 2 weeks. Like, you have another 2 p.m. So you can't do that. Like, you got to move it now. It's like great. I just threw it on there. So yes, so it happens. So it's just absolutely that people, their dreams, have families. So again, like, it's a responsibility when you hire someone in person, or if you hire someone virtual, that's a responsibility. You need to make sure you have your house in order. So you can make sure that, they are committed and some hardworking people, because they appreciate the opportunity. They really do. It's like, they're not this. I haven't, as many as I've hired. I've hired well over 80 VAs, probably 80 to 90 VAs myself. And again, their work ethic is still the same across the board. Whether they're right for me or not, it's different. But it's, and I've hired well over almost 400 agents before in my career too. And I can tell you that the personality variety is a lot more when it comes to agents than it is for VAs. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so totally. I couldn't agree more with that assessment. That's the thing that's like really cool is you get that type of work ethic that really allows you to accomplish what's most important in your business. Well, guys, I'm sure we're going to have another conversation around this sometime. But I want to transition us into the last segment of our show, which is 3, 2, 1 action. It's the same 3 questions we ask every guest. We're going to have to go really rapid too, since we have 2 of you. But let's kick it off with question number 1. All
right, we'll start with Rich and then head over to Sam. Who's the one person that's had the biggest impact on your business and why?
Other than my business partner, Sam, right? Together, Gary Keller, and all my maths coaches.
That's tough. There's so many people that poured into me through the books. But I'm gonna say that the Millionaire Real Estate Agent was a pivotal time in my I read that in a pivotal time in my career. So I'll say that Gary Keller and Jim Rohn. I love Jim Rohn.
All right. Well, we may have just got a head start on question number 2. The second question is, what book has been most influential in your business and why?
I would say How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what am I reading right now? Several books, but yeah, I would say that's probably, I know everyone will say the MREA. That was my number 1, but definitely Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
I can't pick one.
I like that one.
I'm not going to let you make you pick one, but I would have to say, started off with, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then it elevated more. So in my business, I would have to say Gary, Millionaire Real Estate Agent. But if I had to pick a number 2, I would say, so many. I read a lot of Peter Drucker. So The Effective Executive is like one of the big ones.
So we do a huddle every single morning with my team, and we start off with like a little inspirational quote or whatever. And for years I've done Stephen Covey. And this year I changed it to the Daily Drucker because I'm a big fan. And we made it 1.5 weeks, and they came to me and they said, "David, can we switch back to Covey? We don't get this guy."
He's dry, but it's content. Right.
Anyway, question 3.
All right, gentlemen, as you both know, this is the All In Podcast where we want our listeners to take what they've heard today and go put it into action. So what's the one thing our listeners should go do right now today to begin creating leverage in their businesses?
Yeah. I would say analyze everything that you do, write it all down, understand what you're good at, what you like to do, what you're not good at that you like to do, what you are bad at that you like to do, what you are bad at that you don't like to do. And everything that I just mentioned in the last part, turn that into a job description. Call your local Cyberbacker representative and make a pairing immediately.
Right. So Rich said it, get a business evaluation, figure out what you like to do, what you don't like to do, leverage off the rest, enjoy it. We only get one life, enjoy it. What Cyberbacker can help you do and VAs can help you do is have a better quality of life, which is the most important thing. That's why we're into this business. We want to have a good life. You need your time back. Your family, your friends deserve that. So don't be afraid to leverage.
Absolutely. Guys, we love you too. This has been a lot of fun. We're going to link everything up in the show notes that you've heard, listeners, today. You do want to go right now, do exactly what Sam and Rich just said, and then click that link in the show notes and find out if Cyberbacker and virtual assistants are right for you. You're going to learn a lot. Anything we left off, Joe?
think we covered it.
I think we covered it. Guys, this has been another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.